This is Culture Buzz, cohesiveness through diversity. I am Victor Nwora Aghadi. Gaffert, the curator at the German exhibit of the Frontier Culture Museum, Staunton, Virginia, playing the Shaitut, which is a traditional German instrument, to visitors. The Frontier Culture Museum, in its website, says the museum tells the story of the thousands of people who migrated to colonial America and of the life they created here for themselves and their descendants. These first pioneers came to America during the 1600s and 1700s from communities in the hinterlands of England, Germany, Ireland, and West Africa. Many were farmers and rural craftsmen set in motion by changing conditions in their homelands and drawn to the American colonies by opportunities for a better life. Others came as unwilling captives to work on farms and plantations. Regardless of how they arrived, all became Americans and all contributed to the success of the colonies and of the United States. To tell the story of these early immigrants and their American descendants, the museum has moved or reproduced examples of traditional rural buildings from England, Germany, Ireland, West Africa, and America. The museum engages the public at these exhibits with a combination of interpretative signage and living history demonstrations. The outdoor exhibits are located in two separate areas, the Old World and America. The Old World exhibits show rural life and culture in four homelands of early migrants to the American colonies. The American exhibits show the life these colonists and their dependents created in the colonial backcountry, how this life changed over more than a century, and how life in the United States is shaped by its frontier past.
Welcome to our farm.
So what do you do here?
Oh, I just got done finishing up the cooking and kind of been cleaning up, and this is one of our Dorking hens, and she can't see very well. She needs glasses, and so we tend to hand feed her just a little bit to make sure she gets. This is Bridget, the hen.
Was it? Does she lay some of these eggs?
She does lay some of the eggs, yes.
Wow.
Around 1730, the shop would be in operation 10 to 16 hours a day, 6 days a week. I have helpers. My helpers are called strikers. Those big hammers here are strike hammers. Because of social reasons, economic reasons, the inheritance laws, and other factors, you'll find that I utilize only male members of my family as my strikers in here. So if you're a boy living in Ireland in 1730, you will start work at the age of 10. You will work the same hours as the adults. 10 to 16 hours a day, 6 days a week, except when you're in church or in school, and you're going to be whatever your father is when you grow up, whether you like it or not.
So when are they going to play?
What?
Play.
Play? No play. No play.
Discipline.
No play. If you ain't got your playing done by the time you're 10 years old, you're not going to get it done.
In its website, the Frontier Culture Museum, Staunton, Virginia, says during the 1600s and 1700s, nearly 25,000 Africans were brought to colonial America to serve as enslaved agricultural workers, domestic servants, and artisans. Although captives were taken from a vast area of the African continent and from many different ethnic groups, the great majority were members of the West African cultures that lived in the hinterlands of the Atlantic coast. Africans lived in all of Great Britain's North America's colonies, though their population was highest in South Carolina and Virginia. Beginning in the early 1700s, Virginia tobacco planters imported increasing numbers of captive Africans to work their plantations. Nearly 40% of the Africans imported into Virginia during this time were brought from a part of the West African coast called the Bight of Biafra. Many of these captives were Igbo, a people living in the upland area north of the Bight of Biafra in what is now the nation of Nigeria. The West African farm represents life in a free Igbo household in eastern Nigeria of the 1700s.
Akumakalo Njoko is my name. I got involved in this project based on my research. I started researching the Igbo slave journeys, as a matter of fact, retracing the hinterland slave routes in Nigeria. And I was quite deliberate about studying the Igbo because I did not want to get into the habit of homogenizing everybody. So I selected one ethnic group and self-consciously went to document their journey. For me, I regarded that as a pilot project when it started. And then I followed the Igbo journey from the northern Igbo land to Brass, and then from northeastern Igbo land till Bende and Azumini before they went to Bone. And then during this research, I found a cave temple complex. A temple complex in Arochukwu, and it just happened that outlets of this cave would lead to markets, one at Ito, at the beach, going to Cross River, and the other one going to Bonny. So the journey, I did a presentation of this research, establishing the fact that we can retrace people from the very beginning of this journey, from Arochukwu to Ututu, to a market in Ututu, Ututu to Bende, Bende to Uzuakole, passing through Umuahia to Azumini, following the Blue River to Opopo, and then to Bonny. That's exactly, I did that presentation. John Blash is a professor, a folklorist, saw my presentation, and I introduced me to the Frontier Culture Museum. At that point, they were actually planning a West African exhibit and considering who would be the project, the site project, and the ethnic group. And that's how I got into the advisory board to advise the foundation, and then eventually became the principal consultant, and that was in 2005. I have been with this project since then.
Wow. Now, what is the Igbo connection to the West African farmers compound?
Interesting. What happened was that everybody that came through Bonny and the Bight of Biafra to North America went to different places, but about 45% or more came directly to Virginia. At a point in Virginia, it was Igbo land in Virginia.
You're talking about the time of slavery?
Yes, at the time of slavery in the 1700s, the Igbos were the predominant slaves here. They established their own group here. There are groups that you find in South Carolina, North Carolina, from different ethnic groups. The Igbo came to this place to plant tobacco, and that tobacco happened to be the mainstay of the United States economy, or American economy. So the Igbo made a contribution, and that's how the Igbo were chosen to recognize the contributions of the Igbo in building the American frontier culture. Yes.
Mr. John Avoli is the director of the museum, Frontier Culture Museum, and so he certainly has been, part of the brain behind the West African farmhouse. The Igbo house, I saw that written on the web. What's actually the name of this exhibit?
The exhibit's official name is the West African Village, representing the Igbo people. So it is the West African farm, Igbo people.
That's right. You are part of the journey I understand you made a trip to Nigeria, and can you tell us a little bit about that experience?
Well, the experience was wonderful for me, and having been to that part of the world before. I was with a delegation led by Dr. Anna Quinza from Los Angeles, and of course Jack Njuko and several others. We landed in Abuja and were royally treated by the Nigerian government, and of course we were the host of Governor Peter Obi of Anambra State that treated us very, very well. We journeyed through Nigeria from Akwa to Owerri, and we visited many, many places. So very worthwhile experience and enlightening to see actually what we were constructing here come to life back in Nigeria.
Wow. Now, why did you have to choose to use Nigeria? Because I do know that the Africans that came here at that time were not all from Nigeria.
That's correct, but in the research that was done by our Deputy Director Eric Bryan and many other consultants, what we know that the Virginia colonies at that time, the majority of the West African slaves that were here were Igbo. Approximately 40% of them were. So in order to honor that ethnic group, much like we have done to the honor of the Germans, the Scotch Irish, and the English, further contributions to the American frontier, the beginning of America, the blending of America, Igbo played an integral part in that history of America.
The most important thing is to look at this as a recognition of the contribution of the Igbo West Africa in the making of the United States. Without the African presence, it would have been difficult to have the country we have, today in the US. So this is important for many reasons, because it's in a way, it completes the history of this place. We have the presence of the Germans, the Irish, the English. But of course, for a long time, the Igbo or the African presence has been sort of neglected. And this really completes the history of the making of the frontier here and the centrality of Africans in the making of early American history and culture.
Dr. Kanayo Odeluga has been a facilitator of this project too, and he is in a position to tell us a lot about this project and what Nigerians, West Africans, and Igbo people should do with this project we have here.
We can do a lot. One, it speaks to our contribution to the great American story. Two, it is also a reflection of the continuity of history. The fact that Africans, West Africans, and specifically Igbos were part of the people that were assembled here by Providence to create a new great society that we now know as America. It's profound. Now, for many of us growing up in Nigeria, I know all the time that I went through school, we heard about slave trade. We heard some stories that came out of the slave trade, but never did we ever have a clear understanding that our people not only participated in the selling, trading of slaves, but also that we were involved in the making of America. So for us, America is no longer a strange land, but a home where our forefathers, our foreparents had trodden on and left their footprints and imprint in the American culture. And so those of us who are new immigrants should not see ourselves as outsiders, but also part of the continued story of that migration story that came out of Africa, and we are also part of that story.
Yes, Dr. Njoku said something like people can even come here and get married.
For majority of the children that will never have the opportunity of going home and seeing what a typical village or typical Igbo compound will look like, this is a place that they can come home, because here they will be able to gain that knowledge in a way that is preserved for posterity. And I'm talking even beyond us. Our children's children who are going to live in this culture within the American diaspora are going to use this as a backdrop. This could be site for movies, Igbo movie. This could be site for African movie. This could be site for weddings, naming ceremony, chieftaincy title, festivals. And as a living museum, the Frontier Culture encourages people to bring educational programs here, meetings, conventions, so that all the town union conventions, state conventions, club meetings can also happen at the backdrop of the Igbo Farm Village. And they have facilities here for banquet facilities, catering, music, all kinds of things, and usually it's put at the disposal of the Igbo community at a very reasonable rate.
The structure of certainly is functional the way it is now. But is there other things that you look forward to being here, like sculptures, for instance, decorations of the walls and stuff like that will come?
Oh yeah, this is far from being complete. I think what we've been able to do by the grace of God and the effort of Ndi Igbo in America, because our people worked, our people volunteered, our people gave money, bussed themselves, drove, transported themselves, housed themselves in hotels, fed themselves to volunteer in making this possible. And the government of Virginia and the Frontier Culture Museum are quite appreciative of that. Now, what is left is the fine finish, the decoration of the wall, a typical Igbo compound with uli motifs. And those who have experience on how to decorate, like ite ajaoto, is a different act. So then smoothing it out and then decorate it in a way that will reflect our culture, tell our story. Now, the other part of it is that we are asking people that if they have implements of household, things that date back to maybe 50, 20 years, it might just be your great-grandfather's bench, or his loincloth, or his ete, or his ogodo, or your grandmother's eku, or ko, or ite, or nsokwoku, anything that you can use in a house that has some age, antiquity to it, that has value, you can donate to the museum so that they will place it here to reflect, how we used to live.
I don't know if you can establish this scene a little bit, clearer, because I never even thought about that. There was a dominant Igbo community in this place. What happened? I mean, from the historical perspective.
It's a long history. The slave trade came at a time when the population was shifting, migrating from place to place, and people were still establishing the Igbo land. And so the number of people that came from the Bight of Biafra, people that came from Ekoi, Ibibio, all of them passed through Bende and were Igbo. And everybody who came here came at that point in time when what they needed was the people that do the kind of labor that the Igbo people were used to. We are not rice planters. So the people that were conditioned to produce the kind of mounds you needed for the tobacco. The reason our own is specific is that you have Grain Coast, Ivory Coast, Gold Coast. The Bight of Biafra was the slave coast. And that's where they went to pick laborers, not just Igbo. So that's what clearly slave coast. They brought them here to help build America. It just happened that the Igbo came to Virginia. More Yorubas maybe went to Mississippi and Brazil. Sierra Leoneans went to North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia. And they are there. Here, the people that knew how to do what America wanted at that point happened to be the Igbo who came here.
On the inauguration of the Igbo Farm, the West African exhibit at the Frontier Culture Museum, Staunton, Virginia, a fortnight or so after this interview with Jack Njoku, speakers after speakers, African Americans and other Americans, alluded to the fact that the Igbos played a pivotal role in the frontier region of America. One of them was Lawrence Wilder Jr., who is a top official in the Department of Education of the Commonwealth of Virginia, who represented the governor on the occasion.
I'm delighted to be here with you today on the governor's behalf to celebrate the dedication of the Igbo Farm Village. Today is a day of celebration and reflection. It's a day to celebrate not only the accomplishments and contributions of the Igbo tribe and other Africans comprising some of the early settlers of Virginia, but it's also to reflect upon our great shared heritage, which still inspires us today. It's a heritage of shared struggle, sacrifice, determination, self-reliance, religious freedom, and strength. From the beginning of our nation, the inspiring efforts of these frontier settlers have reflected the ingenuity and creativity, the independence and beauty of this nation. It is the painter, the potter, the weaver, the silversmith, and the farmer whose work created an identity for America, which continues to be respected and recognized around the world as distinctive and dynamic. The Frontier Culture Museum captures this spirit in presenting a variety of American cultural forms and providing a link to history through which we can learn, appreciate, and be inspired. Today's occasion brings us together to commemorate the Africans, and in particular the Igbo tribe, whose lives are inseparable from the struggles for liberation and the challenges of settling a new frontier and the creation of a united society. The West African Farm Village commemorates the African origins and culture of the African and African American pioneers and frontiersmen of the 1700s and 1800s, and their contributions to the creation and expansion of the United States. Roughly 300,000 African captives were brought to the 13 colonies between 1700 and 1775. The overwhelming majority of these Africans came from cultures living in the hinterlands of West and West Central Africa. When settlement of Virginia's Appalachian frontier began around 1730, a small number of enslaved Africans and their Virginia-born descendants were among the early settlers. These numbers point out that the Igbo were important to African American culture in Virginia, that many Africans in colonial Virginia were Igbo, and that their descendants may well have formed a substantial portion of African Americans living in the valley between 1755 and 1860.
I'm just coming out from the OB, which is the main house in the homestead of Igbo Farm, one of the exhibits here at the Frontier Culture Museum. And as you can see, so much has been done already, and so much will still need to be done. And you know, but the structure is here, and the Igbos more or less have a homeland here in Staunton, Virginia, and that's just so exciting. So this is it. They won't know.
Start going to luncheon because we'll be going to Gypsy Park to perform. The Aboma is making a brief appearance.
I'm a girlfriend, I'm boyfriend. Okay. There are beautiful girls there, but I know one.